Got it. Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. I'm Debbie, and I'm an alcoholic. I come to you from Concord, California, which is in the greater East Bay of San Francisco. And I want to thank Phil for the invitation. Great to see a number of people I know on this call. It's always amazing what a Zoom call will bring, right? They'll let anybody in pretty much. So it's good to see y'all. It's kind of funny. I just did a quick reshuffle in my head because Phil called me when I was not at my desk or notes, and I said, "Now, what is it you wanted me to share again?" I can't remember. Well, whatever you want to. I said, "Well, how about sponsorship?" Because that's always near and dear to my heart. But then when I sat down and I got my notes out, we had talked about, I would talk about step 6, 7, 10, and 11. So reshuffle, get my notes from those particular steps. So we're going to talk about 6, 7, 10, and 11 tonight. Just a moment about me and what my experience is that I'm bringing to you. It's certainly not a professional or qualified or authorized to talk about those, but my experience is what I will bring to the table tonight. My sobriety date is February 8, 1976, which means I've been with you for over 47 years. It just doesn't seem like that's possible. I mean, again, like I like to say, how can you be 49 years sober when you're only, or 47 years sober when you're only 39 years old? Because at some point you you start making a U-turn, okay? And you start working the numbers backwards. So that's where I am. That's where that number lies today. My home group is the Primary Purpose Group. Now, there's many groups around the world by that name. We are not affiliated with any other primary purpose group. Not that that would be a bad thing, just letting you know, we're just an independent group that meets Monday nights at 7 o'clock in Dublin, California. And everybody here is welcome. We got plenty of chairs, so come on down if you're ever in the Bay Area, and we'd love to have you. That's been my home group for the 23 years I've lived here in the Bay Area. And I'm actively sponsored by a woman named Marilyn S. in Los Angeles, and I actively sponsor, and I see at least one person I sponsor on this call tonight. So I'm in the middle of this deal. I thought Alcoholics Anonymous was, well, I was introduced to you through a treatment program, and you just put the plug in the jug and go to some of those meetings, and there you go. And of course, I couldn't have been more mistaken, because I didn't realize, A, what alcoholism was, and that it is a two symptom illness, the mental obsession and the phenomenon of craving or allergy. I didn't understand that, because you see, I compared your adventures, which seem so big and heinous, and of course they're an alcoholic, to my seemingly tiny adventures. But it was never about the adventures comparison. It was about the two symptoms. And so I had those two symptoms launched the night I picked up my first drink. And so I progressed very rapidly, very focusedly for the next 5 years, and was court ordered to a treatment program. And that's where I'm going to be introduced to you. Now, of course, there were the steps, and we were supposed to take, to get out of there, you had to do the first 5 steps. Now, again, it didn't matter, because I'm not an alcoholic anyway, and I'm not sticking around when we're done. And so, but I just did the check, do what I'm got to do to, quote, get out of here. And when I left, of course, 6 through 12, I never saw. And so now I have 2 more relapses, and I finally get the sobriety date I shared with you today. That is still my sobriety date. because of the things I did differently. I got a home group, a sponsor. I took all of the steps. They shared with me to practice the traditions, not just in my group, but in my personal life. They said, be of service and carry the message. And that's been, to me, what I call the formula for success. So now when I'm going through the steps again, kind of like in this sobriety, I get to 6 and 7, and you can kind of skip over those because you really don't have any defects of character. And there's only 2 paragraphs in the big book. So you're kind of like, on to 8 and 9. And when I was 4 years sober, I just had moved to Atlanta, from Minneapolis to Atlanta. I had a home group locked in, a sponsor locked in, and I took a 4-year birthday cake, and I realized, 7 meetings a week that I've been doing for the last 4 years is a lot of meetings. I'm gonna get me some balance in my life. And I about balanced myself out of Alcoholics Anonymous. So my idea of balance was you trim it back from 7 to 2 or 3, which quickly became 2. Over the next 2 years, my arrival time, which was 45 to 60 minutes, 2 years later had shrunk down to 5 minutes before the meeting started. My departure time was one of the last people to leave. 2 years later, had shrunk down to amen, shake, shake, you see my taillights. I am 6 years sober and extremely restless, irritable, and discontented, AKA on a dry drunk, AKA I have not been taking the treatment for my alcoholism, which is active in the 12 steps. But I came up with a plan. And that plan was that people, places, and things were going to make me happy. Now it's really called Men, Money, and Mansions are going to make me happy. Okay, so I'm on a mission. And for the next 6 months or so, I am focused. And I, of course, meet a couple little fellows at 2 separate times, but to shorten the story, meet a couple little fellows, do the dance of delusion for 3 months, and they each married somebody else. Okay, let me tell you, I've married off more people than you can count. So every time they date, the next person they dated, they married. So I could have gotten a commission out of stuff like that. Okay, so here I am, 6.9 years of roughly of sobriety, and I come crashing down in the rooms of AA. Now, keep in mind, I have not stopped showing up. And I say that specifically because there's 3 kinds of people to me that I have been that come to AA: visitors, attenders, and members. And member is the best. I am connected as a member, involved. I'm not a taker. I'm a giver. I mean, it is warm and fuzzy being a member. An attender, I can certainly attend a lot of meetings. I need to be a member of a home group though. And visit, when that's all I'm doing, not a good package. But my home group met twice a week, and I visited you twice a week. I might as well have been sitting in the parking lot for all that I was engaged in. So the reason to tell you this backstory here is that when I came in, crashed and burned, physically I was sober, but spiritually, mentally, and emotionally at 0, on fumes, bankrupt, might be in the negative. And I had a second psychic change, a second admission of my alcoholism. The first time I certainly surrendered to the alcohol and substances and this way of life I was running. And this is like, I surrendered to the illness of alcoholism, the unmanageability of my life, the me running the show again. So I took these steps again as if I had never seen them before, as if I'd never read our literature before. I really just tried to do a complete wash of what I thought I knew to have that new experience. I was doing the set aside prayer before I even knew there was one. I just needed a new experience. And when I got to 6 and 7, wowzer. What at one time had been the check, check steps were the game changers. You see, I'd never seen them before like they were, because it always sounded to me like, yep, I'm willing. Yep, God, take them. Like I had no participation. And in a way, I don't. But in a way, I do have participation. I need to show up for this opportunity, for these defects, which will never be removed. They haven't from me. But what they can be is squashed down. They can be tempered. They can be paused on. You see, I don't get to just blow up at somebody and be angry and say, oh, I guess God didn't remove my anger today. No, you didn't pause. I don't get to blame God and my alcoholism on bad behavior. I'm completely sober. I know exactly what I'm doing. And I do not get to blame that on God or my alcoholism. My alcoholism has everything to do with my involvement with alcohol when I pick up the drink. But I have a set of tools of how to live differently. By not practicing them, I don't get to blame my alcoholic mind. No, I don't. That's me. Okay, so step 6, one paragraph in the big book. It asks me, if you can answer to your satisfaction, there's a bunch of questions having followed the 5th step. We have emphasized willingness as being indispensable. Are we ready? Are we now ready to let God remove from us all the things which we have admitted are objectionable? What does that mean? So this is not an official definition, okay? This is my definition. The objectionables seem to be what I discovered in the 4th column of the resentments. Those defects of character, for me, I call those the objectionables. And I ask myself, what is it that I do or behavior I do that causes me or other people harm? What are those things? And I'm somebody who works much better in a visual type of environment. So my way of doing things is I took a piece of paper, I put a vertical line down the middle. On one, I titled it step 6, on the other column, step 7. Because a lot of times we roar them right into, mesh them into each other, but they really, to me, have a great significance. Now, I listed in that column on step 6, what were the objectionables? So I could really get kind of a read on this stuff. Let me share you. I'm not saying these are my only ones, okay? But these are some of the popular ones that I have. Number 1, self-righteousness. Oh boy, I can help you run your life, not a problem. So tell you what to do, where you're wrong, your mistakes, not a problem. Self-righteousness. That causes me harm because I might lose a friendship. I might get my head bit off. I might, have people tell me, why don't you mind your own business, which is true. Ego is a top one. Impatience, pettiness, prejudice. And I'm not talking about, one type, just prejudging people, places, and things. It doesn't have to have a rhyme or reason for it. Prejudging. I wasn't raised that way at all. And yet I will make a judgment about a person, place, or thing, and I have no connection, don't even know anything about it, but I've already judged it in my mind. Comparison, comparing me to others, and story stealing. All right, I'll explain that last one in a minute. Now, here's where I get the clue about the action involved, that I'm not just sitting on the couch and hoping God will just whoosh it out like a vacuum. So in step 6 in the 12 and 12, which I love to go to, it says, if we ask, God will certainly forgive our derelictions. But in no case does he render us white as snow and keep us that way without our cooperation. So I need to participate with him by putting some skin in this game, by putting in some awareness. And at the very end of that same chapter, it says, at the very least, we shall have to come to grips with some of our worst character defects and take action toward their removal as quickly as we can. Now, I really would love to be rid of all of them, never hurt anyone's feelings anymore, never do anything wrong. But that isn't how we connect with each other. We connect with each other with these defects. We can say to somebody, I know I have that same one, and here's what I try to do. And you see, this is what binds us and connects us. And so with step 6, I got to see these things that are kind of ugly looking, and I don't like them. And the longer I'm sober and the more I practice the contrary actions of step 7, as I see them, the less harmful they are. They're not as frequent. They don't last as long. They're not as destructive. They're not as powerful. And so when we move to step 7 and we say that beautiful prayer, I took that same list and I shared with you what the objectionables were. And my action was, okay, what do I think would be the contrary action that I could shoot for? One day at a time. So I'll give you what those are. Self-righteousness, contrary action. Shut up, Deb. Just shut up. They don't need your unsolicited advice. They don't need nor care about your opinion. Just shut up. If you're asked for an opinion, be kind. Be kind with it. Ego. Now, ego can be used for good. It's when it crosses the line that it becomes my enemy. So, for example, this is me, I would not dream of coming on camera without being what I like to call camera ready. I would not come on here without my hair and makeup done. Oh no, I got too much vanity and ego for that. And I want to bring my best to you, Alcoholics Anonymous, whether you're on Zoom or in person. But when it crosses the line is when I expect all these compliments or, oh my God, you're amazing. That's when it crosses the line. And you see, I don't do that for you. I do it for me because I enjoy it and I like bringing my best to you. Okay. Impatience. Opposite for me is pause. It's amazing how I can fly off onto the rocket of impatience. Just, okay, why don't you just get up and walk away from the computer at this time? Why don't you go throw the ball for the dog. Why don't you go basically get away from what launched it? Because nothing's going to get solved in that frame of mind. Petty. Oh my God, I'll give you $200, but if you borrow something from me and you still owe me 17 cents, I don't forget. I mean, oh Jesus, it's embarrassing to say it, but that pettiness is just irritating to me. It's just like I can't let it go for some reason. And my contrary action is let it go, give it to the universe. You may not lend them any money anymore, but just give it to the. So I can't let that be disturbing my spiritual welfare. Prejudice. Design a new story. Why don't you go talk to the person or say, hey, I bet that's helped a lot of people, or write a new story in my mind instead of going with the one I started, which is incorrect. It is based on nothing. Comparison. I can compare how I look, education, experience. They can speak 5 languages. I manage English pretty good. I mean, I can do all these comparisons. And what I've learned to do as my contrary action is appreciate what their skill set or their abilities or their intellect is. They've got their gifts and skill set. I've got my gifts and skill set. My husband's is different from mine. There's a lot of traits he has I wish I was more like, and he'd say, well, there's a lot about you I wish I was more like. And so I can appreciate or learn from those who have set skill sets I don't have. And the last one is story stealer. Now that's always a fun one. So story stealer, what is that? The first time I heard that used, probably about 10 years ago, and the late beloved Charlie P. out of Austin, Texas, was sharing his story on step 10. And he got to a point, now I'm listening to these hours of recordings. I wasn't there that year, so I'm just listening to the recordings. And there are hours and hours of them. But here's the nugget I took out. And he said, my wife told me the other day I was a story stealer. He said, what is that? Now, this isn't the exact story, but it's the premise of it. She said, the other day when we were talking with Bob, and Bob was saying, yeah, Margaret and I went out to dinner to celebrate our anniversary. Oh my gosh, we've been married for X number of years. And oh yeah, that what a treat that is. Bob kind of, is interrupted. And he said, well, we went down to the Cattleman's Ranch for dinner, and Charlie jumps in with Cattleman's. Oh my God. Yeah, we were down there about a month ago. Have you had their big T-bone steak and plenty of this? And oh, by the way, the point being is poor Bob's story got not only stolen, but stepped on and held for ransom. When he told that story, I thought, oh my gosh, how many times do I do that? Now, I do that to identify, to connect to you with your story. Yes, I've done or been there or whatever. Instead of interrupting them and making it my story now and all about me and what I did, the contrary action is, oh, fantastic. So how many years have you been married? Is this your favorite place to go for? I can ask questions to help enhance their experience instead of stealing their story and making it all about me. And so you see, these are the kinds of 6 and 7 is still this is an active step section here. It wasn't one and done. It was active, or is active for me. And it's so interesting when I got there and I saw, to me, I always remembered the first line in step 6. This is the step that separates the men from the boys. I don't know why I always like the rhyme of it, so to speak, not that it rhymed, but the flow. And it made me say, now it's time to grow up, Deb. It is time to grow up. And so that's what 6 and 7 have been, not resting on the fact that, well, I guess God will move when he feels like it. I need to put my skin in the game, my pause, my participation, but really that line, if I thought about it, between 6 and 7, to stop 6 from going further is pause. Pause. And we learn about pause in step 11. So moving on to step 10, it's 4 paragraphs in our big book, but my, oh my, do they ever speak volumes to me? Okay, now, many people say at night, I do a 10th step every night. Okay, I do an 11th step every night. Now, the way it gets kind of confusing is because step 10 in the big book really is focused on keeping our day as we're experiencing it cleaned up. 1 through 9 I've gone through the history and I'm making amends. But 10 is like, okay, you got a clean day today now. Let's keep it that way. But then I hit a bump in the road and I do a harm. It's asking me promptly make it. Now, I will tell you, promptly sometimes might be 2 days, but promptly make that amend. But if I have ruminated and justified it, I will catch it in my 11th step nightly review. So I'm going to talk about step 10 as we keep our day clean. Years ago, a man I admire greatly, the late Tom I, we were at a conference together. It's probably a good 15 years ago. And he said, I overheard him say, steps 10, 11, and 12, they're not the maintenance steps for me. Now, I'd heard that prior to that moment on my sobriety, and it thought, well, that makes sense, that they're the maintenance steps. And again, I'm not saying if you call them that it's wrong. I'm just saying, here's how I had a revision in thinking about them. And he said, no, they're the growth steps. What is he talking about? So I came home, whipped open that step 10, and you know how things are. It's been there all the time, but somebody snuck it in there. You know how that goes. And it's telling me to continue to set right any new mistakes as I go along. So as my day progresses, oops, let's get that right. But again, I have a catch basin if I don't. We've entered the world of the spirit. And this is where I got what he was telling. Our next function, a function is an expected duty. Our next function is to grow. In 2 areas. I'm to grow in understanding and to grow in effectiveness. Okay. It's not an overnight matter. Continues for a lifetime. When I read that, I had this shift. And from that point to now, it has helped me make decisions of what I'm to do. It's helped me decide, is this going to be useful to anybody but me? Will this have an impact on anyone except me? Now, all of us have things that we enjoy. I love going to the movies. I'm going to the movie after this meeting is over. But for me to go to the movies every single day, which I would love to do, which I would not do, which would feel incredibly selfish. What do I not do that is important and productive to do that? Well, I need a movie fairly regular once a week to just sort of do a reset, a refuel for me. Somebody might need golf or knitting or something like that. But for me to do that every day would be really against being useful in God's world, because it's just now all about me. I'm just taking up me time. And effective or understanding, there's a lot of things I don't understand. There's a lot of things I'll never have an experience about. But this is why, using our literature, I try to educate myself, like reading our pamphlets, reading other pieces of literature that we and the AAWS and Grapevine produce, going outside the comfort zone, the zone of knowledge that I have, and expand that so I can be more useful to the variety of alcoholics that come to AA. So the other thing that's so powerful about this particular step is on page 85, when it reminds us that it's easy to let up on the spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels. Good job. You did that a year ago. Good job. I mean, as if that's supposed to keep launching my fire every day. No, every day is a day I got to launch that fire. Every day. And we'll talk about that in a second. But I remember being about 8 years sober, feeling a little restless, irritable, and discontented again. I've taken all the steps. I made that final tough amend. And I'm kind of waning in enthusiasm. 8 years sober. And I heard a guy say, and many of you have probably heard something similar to this, but it was the first time I heard it. Guy talked about feeling very similar to that. And he said, I realized I was trying to live today on last year's program. Boom. Bingo. That's what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing. I didn't realize that. I didn't intend to. I didn't mean to. But I was resting on my laurels. It says we're headed for trouble if we do, because alcohol is a subtle foe. We're not cured of alcoholism. This I know. Here's my favorite line. What we really have is a daily, not a weekly, not in every month, not in every AA birthday, a daily reprieve. And when I looked up that word reprieve and it said a delay of the death sentence, oh, that kind of pops off the page when you look at it like that, right? I have a daily delay of the death sentence, but not because we're cute or talented or anything like that. It says it's contingent on the maintenance of my spiritual condition, that every day is a day when we must carry the vision of God's will into all of our activities. Not just Thursdays, not just the sunny days. Every day is that type of spirit I want to bring to the day. And so keeping my day clean from mistakes, make prompt amends, that's the goal of today. And I'm going to do pretty good if I've got that 6 and 7 list somewhat in check. But I'm as human as anyone else. I get to feeling bad physically, got a migraine going on, got some disappointing news. I'm not getting what I wanted. Those defects of character can go right up the skin level. They can just totally get on board. And that's when I have to really be careful. Sometimes I miss the mark. Sometimes I get a little tone in my voice, and I have to make amends for that. But that pause feature that I learned in step 11 is so powerful. The other thing about step 10 I love so much is it does come out of the 12 and 12. Many of you know that statement. It is a spiritual axiom. An axiom is a truth that needs no proof. It's a spiritual axiom that every time we are disturbed, no matter what the cause, there is something wrong with us. What? Aren't there any exceptions? No. That's like the good news and the bad news. No. So when I am, quote, disturbed, I got to ask myself, why am I disturbed by that person's behavior or that? You know what? It always comes down to the same thing. They're not doing what I want them to do. Shucks. They're not behaving the way I want them to behave or doing what I want them to do. And when I really finally got that, when I could make the stop, look, and pay attention type thing, when did you become their God? When did they have to check in their life with you? You know? And so it became one of those things that when I'm all tightened up, why are you so disturbed? They're not behaving. They're not doing what I want them to do. And boy, I'll tell you what, that sets me free. It resets me. Now with 11, there are 3 parts to a day: opening, during, closing. That's what I got. 3 parts of a day. On page 86, it gives me a great guide, 4 paragraphs starting with on awakening, so you kind of know where to begin. It focuses on the 24 hours, the day ahead, things like that. And then there's like 2 paragraphs, really, or 1 paragraph and a little follow-up. It works, it really does, on as we go through the day. Now, that's the bigger chunk of the day. As we go through the day, we pause. When agitated or doubtful, and ask for the right thought or action. The more I can practice this, the less amends I make, the better I feel about whatever this is going on. I like to say I'm rarely doubtful, but I am frequently agitated. I mean, I'm telling you, throughout the day, agitated. Right thought or action is usually do nothing, say nothing, and that includes body language. That includes body language for me. And then the beautiful way to close our day. Now, I start my day, the step is so beautiful in its writing. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry whatever the heck that is today out, right? I did a little ad-libbing there. The conscious contact is what I want to have. So my choice is I do not roll out of bed, get on my knees, because I am not conscious at that time. Let me tell you, I am blurry and fuzzy, and I got cats and dogs, and I'm not present. I do personal business and this and that, and get a beverage and let the dogs out, get myself dressed. Now, as about 20 minutes have gone by, I am now conscious. Now I come to God. Now I'm ready to receive, give. I choose to get on my knees. It's not a religious thing by any means. I need to start in a humbled way. And by being on my knees, I keep my focus better. I am there for a purpose, to begin the connection today with God. Turn the lamp on. And we have a little chit chat, and then I say out loud step 3 and step 7 prayers. And until I can kind of feel that silence in a way, I don't get off my knees. I usually feel it pretty quickly, but if I don't, it's not going to be the way I want it to be for this connection. So now I feel that I get on my chair, and I have several things I enjoy reading. Some AA and Grapevine produced, some not. I change things up partially every year. Some things are consistent. And my reading, now this is the beauty, is that how you do your prayer, how you do your meditation, there is no one way, right way, only way, the way. It's what seems to work best for you. And again, I change it up. You're not locked into anything. Feel free to experiment. So I have several things. Thank you. I have several things that I read. And I realized some years ago, and I won't go to the length of the story, but my reading is / my meditation. I get the warm fuzzies, the spiritual soothing through my readings. I think about what I read. And if it happens to be one of those kind of mornings where I'm reading and all of a sudden I'm thinking about this over here, then I have to read out loud. So I try to get just one voice going on here. Read out loud and think about it for a moment, what I just read, that onto my next book. A lot of times I don't remember what I read. And I used to bother me, and I used to make notes, and I got to remember. And then I realized I don't need to remember. I fed my spirit that morning with wonderful, beautiful, spiritual-based information, readings, time. I don't have to remember. I've been fed. So that's how I start. When I end the day, I get back on my knees. Again, keeping my focus on my purpose. When I start sponsoring gals, most of the time, not all, but most of the time, I say, share with me about your prayer and meditation practice. The majority are always good in the morning. A little sketchy at night. Not too good about that. And I said, this really is something I'm going to ask you to focus to be good at. In the morning, we turn on the light. At night, we turn off the light. I don't want the crap happening throughout the day to get drug over into the beautiful new day I'll be presented tomorrow. Let me review today. Maybe again, as I've mentioned before, maybe I didn't make that a prompt amend, and I'm going to say, yeah, I need to call her tomorrow. Maybe there's something that got left undone that needed to be done, priority for tomorrow. But I need to be able to silence myself. And this is my turning the light out of my day. Then I go ahead, and I also kind of review those questions. How did I do today, God? What's my report card today? How did I do? And then I get in the bed and I have my wind down time. Maybe I'll read a little bit, maybe a little solitaire on my phone. But the prayers are not done in bed. Because again, I can get too distracted with the dogs and this going on and getting comfortable. This helps me stay my focus. So these 4 steps are still in a very active state in my life. And I am so thankful to have had the opportunity to share a little bit about my experience with them. And so I'm going to head and close up early. If anybody has any, I guess, comments, questions, or whatever, Phil or Kevin, I don't know how you do that, but there you go. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Really, real quick, everybody come on in.
Thank you.
You're amazing.
Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you, Debbie. Loved every bit of it.
Beautiful.
Nita from
Yes.
Florida.
Thank
Loved
you.
it.
Yes, thank you for your honesty.
Thank you so much.
Love you.
Thank you.
All right, so we usually don't do questions, but we can probably do one. Like, we have time. So if anybody has like a question they need to ask, raise your hand. I'm gonna do this like an auction. Going once, going twice. I'm going to read page 164. Oh, one real quick, chat is going to be open. I'm going to open it up right now. That way you can communicate with anybody you want. And thank Debbie for the wonderful job. Page 164. Our book is meant to be suggestive only.